Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Memorial Tournament. Gonna break down what to expect from the Muirfield Village Golf Club, and then afterwards go through some of my betting and DFS exposure to give you an idea of how I'm attacking this week. So a lot to talk about, no fluff. We're just gonna get right to it this week. I started off with a look at the golf course and some of the key stats that I'm using to get to those top plays. We're not gonna spend as long on this section of the video just because I have a whole video with a course breakdown this week. So make sure to check that out. I'll put a link in the description of the video to that. But in terms of my key stats, we're looking at some long irons. This is a longer par 72, and then on top of that, a real difficult course because of how many shots you have around the green. The scrambling rate is about 54%, which is about maybe 8-9% lower than your tour average. So that's not really where all the bogeys are coming in. It's with the low green and regulation percentage. So if you have an elite tier player with the long irons that can still hold these firm green complexes, then you can go out there and really get an advantage. But even the best players are still only going to hit like 65, maybe 70% of their greens. So having a sturdy around the green play on top of a good long iron play is really where you see your champions and top 5 finishers coming in. So it's hard to be elite in both categories, but if you happen to be elite in one of the two, it's going to be really useful this week. And then on top of that, I think it's more of a driving accuracy course over that driving distance. Though it is nearly 7,600 yards, and that's where that distance factor will come in, this golf course is much more about keeping yourself in position than going out there and bombing and gouging it. Because of the fact that the fairways are actually wider than you'd expect, they're about 5, maybe 6 yards wider than your tour average. Guys that are accurate can go out there and hit 10 plus fairways per round. And if you can avoid that rough, that's about a half stroke penalty every time you get into it. That's going to be huge for your score at the end of the day. And because it's a 0.47 shot penalty every time you miss the fairway around Muirfield Village, players that are only hitting 5-6 fairways are going to have an extremely difficult time to go out there and shoot a low score. So it's definitely more about keeping yourself in play, and then with those long irons going out there and doing your scoring. I'm looking at bogey avoidance, as this is one of the most difficult golf courses that we're going to see the entire year. It's worth noting that they are going to get a little bit of a rainstorm on Wednesday, so early in the week it might be a little bit softer than what they're used to, so that could keep scoring closer to even par, perhaps even slightly under par for some of the waves out there. However, by the time this gets to the weekend, they do have a sub-air system that they could crank. I'm not expecting it to play under par. In fact, it's probably more realistically going to play half a stroke over, maybe an entire stroke over par in round one, and then if it's windy, right, chalked it up. It could play 2, even 2.5 strokes over. So it'll be a little bit wind dependent, but it looks like we're going to get a softer golf course, but still definitely looking at that bogey avoidance. If there's anything that's de-emphasized, it's that putting, also that driving distance, like I just mentioned, not as big a factor at this golf course. And then the putting, you can still find some poppers that play well here, right? Denny McCarthy with 2 straight top 5s has done it with the flat stick. A lot of your top end finishers do gain putting, but they're not really putting first type of players. Prime example would be Victor Hovland, who went out there and torched it out there in the green complexes, more so that ball striking sort of player. Even guys like Colin Morikawa, right, aren't putting specialists heading in, but they went out there and had respectable weeks on the greens when they played well here. And of course, right, he withdrew in the last round last year, which was just crazy for anyone that played him in DFS. But maybe a little bit of a revenge factor there. And players like him that are a little bit more inconsistent with the flat stick are definitely prime candidates at this kind of golf course. So that's what I would say would be a little bit de-emphasized, right? Driving distance, maybe that putting. I'm also looking at shots gained hard conditions, apex height as extra stats there. Hard conditions, pretty self-explanatory. The apex height is to go out there and hold some firm greens, which again, with that sub-air system, they'll be firm by Friday, probably super firm by the time we get to Saturday and Sunday. So I wouldn't expect those soft conditions on Thursday to define this golf tournament. And then in terms of comps, I've got 5 on here. The top 3 are a little bit weighted, a little bit heavier than the rest here in my modeling. But we got Augusta National for the Masters, Bay Hill for the API, Genesis with Riviera. Then I'm also looking at a tough par 72, another Jack Nicklaus design with the Cognizant Classic. And then the Quill Hollow Club, another tough par 72 with some length, some nasty bunkers, also gnarly rough around the green. A lot of parallels that can be made with all 5 of these golf courses. So the only one that's not a par 72 would be the Genesis, but that is still a really difficult Dr. Alistair McKenzie design. that just like the Masters, a lot of the inspiration came from this golf course. So it's meant to be one of those golden age design kind of golf courses, which is kind of atypical from Jack Nicklaus, which is why I'm looking at these classical, real difficult sort of tracks. So that's the model for this week. Again, don't want to spend too much time there and just go ahead and hop into our exposure. So we're going to go through some of our core plays, value plays that I'll be deploying out there in DFS for sure this week. Unfortunately, Hard Rock hasn't posted an outright board yet, so I'm not sure what I'm going to go with for outright bets. However, I posted some of my top targets here. My core plays, value plays are always what I try and go out there and bet outright. One of them is going to be a top 10 bet. That'll be our lower 6K range player that we're taking for a lot of salary savings this week, but I'll give you an idea of what I'm looking at if I'm trying to bet somebody. So first off is not an outright target. The number is just too low regardless of what book you have access to. I'll look for an outright number live if perhaps it drifts closer to like 10 to 1, maybe 15 to 1, and that is of course on world number 1 Scottie Scheffler. If there was a golf course that you could design to fit his game, it would be Muirfield Village, a golf course where it's nice to be off the tee, but you don't have to be. It's more so about your positioning. He's not only long off the tee, but also a top 50 driving accuracy player, sometimes even top 20, top 25 on tour of the category if he's really playing well there. The best approach player, not even close when it comes to shots gained approach. Around the green is maybe the best player on the PGA Tour. And then obviously he's not the best putter, but if there's one thing that you can slightly de-emphasize this week, it's of course that flat stick. And if there was any sort of shots gained profile to show you that he can get it done, it's last year, right? Finished top 3 and he lost about 3.5 strokes putting. So he's clearly capable of going out there and having that spike performance and perhaps even winning this golf tournament while he's losing a bunch of strokes putting. We've seen it happen before. He's actually gone out there and won with a horrible flat stick, let alone if he were to go out there and post a neutral or even a positive putting performance that we've seen him do numerous times in 2024, right? It's why he's been so dominant out here this season, as he's shown a lot of upside with that flat stick. So I don't know if you needed sold on playing somebody like Scottie Scheffler, but at $12,500, pricing does only go down to $6,000 this week, so no 5K range to go out there and use in this kind of field. A little bit of a bummer there. It's going to be harder to play Scottie Scheffler, but if I'm spending up outside of the 10K range, right, I'd rather it be Scottie than a Rory or a Xander Schauffele. Not like I'm not expecting both to, stay out of contention, right? Both are probably going to be in the neck of it up there with Scottie. It's just that Scottie is so much better than everyone that I think he should be at least 2K more than those other two players. And he's about, 1,400 more than Rory. He's about 1,600 more than Xander Schauffele. Just doesn't feel like a big enough gap for me. And if you're going to have to go up there, spend up, really impact your salary, the one player that I think is actually worthy of doing that with would be world number 1 Scottie Scheffler, who could boat race the field at this sort of golf course. And just to show you why, last year his round 4 performance, he went out there when the scoring average was 3 strokes over par and shot a 65. Went out there in the hardest conditions humanly imaginable, and it just pulled off an absolute upset. So I think that's something that you might want to keep an eye on, is Scottie Scheffler's ownership by the time you get to the end of the week, because if he's a no-brainer play for us, I'm sure he's a no-brainer play for a lot of the community out there, and he could be 40, maybe even 50% owned. So just something that you're going to want to monitor. I'm going to play him if he's in that 40, 50% range. If he's, for some reason, is going to be like 50, 60% owned, that's the range where I would start to get worried about it. I would just, if you're going to play him, accept that he's going to have a ton of ownership, and you've got 5 other spots to get different. And because you're spending $12,500 with one of your players, you're going to have to spend down. It's going to force you to take a few pivots down low, which is a real easy way to get that leverage and all of the uniqueness you need to go out there and not duplicate yourself. Next up, we got Collin Morikawa at $9,800. Another player that I think will be chalky because of his course history, also his ascending form heading into this event. $9,800 is a pretty fair price tag. I'd use him as a first man in. It would be an extremely aggressive second man in if you're starting with Scottie Scheffler, but a player that really fits the mold for this course. More of a precision guy off the tee, which if anything, I think that's what I'm siding towards this week. Doesn't have to be what you're siding towards, but historically, right, that rough is so penal that these accuracy accuracy first players have, played very well around this golf course. Denny McCarthy getting into contention is a really good sign of that. But, your Patrick Cantlays, right, can be very accurate, very long off the tee. Same thing with John Rahm, were the guys that dominated this golf course over the last 5-6 years. So somebody like Colin Morikawa fits that same kind of mold, where maybe he's not as long as some of the other players there, but he's just as accurate, maybe even more accurate than some of those names that I mentioned. And at the same time, his long irons are even better than some of those other players. So that's where I think he brings a lot of upside. If I could get 14 to 1 or better, I would be a buyer on Colin Morikawa this week, but we'll have to see what the Hard Rock bet board looks like, right, when it drops here in, I would have guessed, no time out here on Monday afternoon. So let's see what the number is. If it's 14 to 1 or better, I'll definitely buy. If it's better than like 15, 16 to 1, we might have to make it like a 2-unit bet outright. So that's what I'm thinking out there, Colin. In terms of the shots gained metrics, they pretty much speak for themselves. You can see here is gaining in all 3 tee to green categories. The around the green play is probably the biggest improvement that we've seen from Colin. The shots gained ball striking has always been there. He's been very accurate, decently long off the tee. Approach play, elite every single year, pretty much no matter when you look at his shots gained profile. He's going to be gaining a bunch on approach. The putter, a little bit hit or miss, a little bit touch and go out there for Colin Morikawa. But this around the green play has become a strength of his, specifically out of gnarly rough. So a shots gained metric that I guess I didn't mention before, but the around the green play, I'm looking at shots gained around the green out of rough and bunkers because that's pretty much every hole here. If you saw my course breakdown, there's not really a lot of shaved off fairway areas, and the courses where shots gained around the green are really spiking for Colin Morikawa are courses that fit that same sort of mold. So PGA Championships, right, where you've seen them pop off, or that same kind of setup. So I don't think that's a coincidence for Colin Morikawa, and probably a good reason why he's gaining so many strokes around the green. Next up, you've got Hideki Matsuyama, who I'm taking at $9,000. He's potentially available at 40 to 1 or better. I saw one book that had him at, I believe, 45 to 1 to win. So if I could get that kind of number, I would be, again, considering a 2-unit outright bet on him. But at $9,000, he is my 4th ranked player in terms of model ranking, so only behind the big 3 up top. I got Scotty number 1, Rory's number 2 in my model. Also, Xander is in the number 3 spot. And then you got to go the whole way down here to Hideki to find number 4. So in terms of statistical value, he is arguably the best value that we have on the entire slate. And a lot of it makes sense, right? He's not the most consistent putter. You take a look at his last 12 measured rounds, and everything but the putter is elite, right? He's gaining in all 3 tee to green categories, a stroke around the green, which is just next level stuff. Approach play is elite. Off the tee play is solid there at a half a stroke per round. And kind of like Colin Morikawa, more of a precision guy off the tee at this stage of his career, and an elite tier iron player and around the green. Right? If there's golf courses where you got to be good on approach and good around the green, my number 2, 1 and 2 key stats this week, Hideki Matsuyama is your guy, right? You take him at long, difficult golf courses. That's what we have here. The putter has not been great, but even despite that, he's posted some really respectable finishes. So I think there's upside if he has that spike performance. And the reason why you bet him outright is he's capable of gaining 4 or 5 strokes putting. And when he does that, he wins at almost a 100% clip. I mean, if he does that, right, the only person that's going to contend with Hideki is a Scotty Scheffler if he has it for all 4 days. Because Hideki Matsuyama's ball striking tee to green play is up there with those sort of players, with the Rorys, the Xander Schauffele's of late. It's all about the X factor, which is the flat stick, and which is why I think he has a lot of upside out there in GPPs. But from the outright perspective, I think is capable of cashing a 40 to 1 ticket. So that's what I'll say on Hideki. I think the ownership will be there, right? With that kind of form, right? He fits this golf course quite well when it comes to the comp courses. I do think that he'll be in that maybe 20% range. It's worth noting that Morikawa, right? I think he'll be getting some ownership. Scotty Scheffler for sure is going to be getting a bunch of attention himself. But even though I'm starting with some more popular options up top, doesn't mean I'm going to cripple myself with ownership. Down there in that mid to lower tier range, you're going to see our next 2 value plays are going to be low-owned options that you can use to go out there and get a little bit different with your lineup build. So that'll give you the ownership leverage you're looking for, also that uniqueness so you don't duplicate yourself with other lineups, and help offset some of that ownership that you're spending on up top. So these 3 players are guys that I'm willing to build around. And frankly, right? If I'm going to take somebody as a core play, take them in maybe close to half my lineups, maybe even more, right? With Scotty Scheffler, they better be worthy of taking at that kind of ownership, right? They're not going to be some slappy. I'm playing in the mid to lower tier range. So give me some chalk up top. I'm willing to eat that for pretty much any sort of DFS event. Still love my fades. Still love my, pivots up top as well, right? The guys that I'm trying to get to at lower ownership, but I'm not afraid to take somebody as a core play with some ownership up top either. It's worth noting before we go to our value plays, I want to point out my Patreon page where you can check that out in the description of this video. On there, of course, is where you can get access to the spreadsheets. So to see all of my projections, modeling for every player in the field, everything that is blacked out here on the spreadsheets, make sure to check that out. On there for $15, the DFS tier is how you get access to this, and it gives you my take for every single player, right? Not just the 6 guys that I talk up here in my videos. You've got my projections on there, ownership when that drops, my entire player pool for my 150 max GPP lineups, also my model rankings for every single player, whether it's course fit, recent form rankings, all of that is there at your disposal. You've got recent form, event history to look at, shots gained metrics over the last 24 and 12 rounds, and of course, all of my weightings in my modeling. So you can replicate that, try and use that on whatever site you use for your personal model to go out there and build some lineups, set up some projections, whatever you want to do out there. So all of that is available to you over there on the Patreon page, and of course helps support the channel, helps support your boy here with making this free content for you guys, and gives you all of the content that I'm going with week to week, not just my top six plays. And now moving on to our value plays, we've got Matt Fitzpatrick at $8,200. So Matty Fitz has not been in the best form of late, which is why him and the next value that we're getting to are going to be potential leverage spots. And I say potential because sometimes these kind of players still get ownership because they're, either too cheap, which I agree with both of these players, or people just know their upside, right? Like they're, can be out of form. It's kind of like Jordan Spieth, right? People will still play him even when he's out of form sometimes just because they know what he's capable of. But Matt Fitzpatrick, a little bit of shaky form, but has been really accurate off the tee. In fact, has been elite off the tee when it comes to his driving accuracy, and historically plays well at these difficult courses, right? US Open champion, right? Has shown up at major championships of late. Now, the form a little bit sketchy. This is also why I think the ownership is going to be lower, but missed cut, T52, T28 doesn't inspire any sort of, feelings of confidence there. But if we take a look at the course history, it gets a little bit better, right? T9 last year, couple missed cuts. So this is a volatile course history, but third back there 4 years ago, and then a T68 way back there in 2019. He was early in his career at this stage, so to see that T3 finish is rather impressive. And I don't worry about the T68 as much. Now these missed cuts over the last few seasons are a little bit more worrisome, but that T9 finish last year, shows you the upside that Matty Fitz has at this golf course. So for him, it's quite simple. He's got to hit a lot of fairways, and then the long irons have to show up. He's been very much, touch and go when it comes to the iron play. If we go down here to his shots gained metrics, you'll see that he's gaining in all 4 categories, but nothing inspiring with the approach play and around the green. He's been a little bit disappointing in both of those categories. Off the tee is never really a strength of his. Again, more precise than he is long off the tee, but that works at this golf course. These are the 2 categories where he's going to have to get hot. I trust him with the flat stick. He's one of the better putters that we have in the world. Just need a spike week with the approach play and around the green. So I'm betting him outright. He's shown the upside to win in this sort of field, having a major championship to his name. And if I can get 50 to 1 or better, which feels pretty fair on Matt Fitzpatrick, I'm going to go out there and take him on Hard Rock Bet. And a good bent grass putter too, which is a little bit of an added bonus there as well. Next up, you've got Zalatoris at 60 to 1 or better for an outright. I'm taking him at 7,500 in DFS lineups. And unlike Matty Fitz, I think he's going to have to get some ownership steam. Even though his form isn't there, you can see terrible ranking in terms of the stat fit. All of that because of the last 12 measured rounds, where he's had a few missed cuts. He's really just never had his best stuff. He started hot after returning from injury, and then has actually gone progressively worse. So a little bit of a slump for Zalatoris for sure. But because of that talent level, because he plays well at these really difficult tracks, people are still going to play him, myself included, right? I see the upside out there with Zalatoris. And the sneaky thing about Willie Z, which really made me a buyer, which made me potentially want to take him for an outright here at 61 or better would be his driving accuracy, where he's top 20 on the PGA Tour this year at going out there and finding the short stuff. So if Willie Z is going to go out there, hit a bunch of fairways, rely on that long iron play, that is the perfect recipe for finding success here. And the courses where he's been solid around the green, right, have been your difficult major championship sort of venues. And any golf course that de-emphasizes the putting is going to be huge for Willie Z, right? He's not the best putter out there on the PGA Tour. In fact, right, he's still a loser on bent grass, but that's nearly half a stroke better per round than his 24-round baseline. So if he could just suck a little bit worse on the greens, keep up a pretty solid tee to green profile, I think he's got some upside. So we take a look at the last 24 rounds. It has not been pretty for Willie Z, but still gaining ball striking. So, that's not the worst. The issue is around the green with the putter, where he's been leaking strokes quite a bit. I trust him to turn it around the green. He definitely has that kind of upside. The putter has got to flip. And if there's a surface where he's managed to be decent on the greens, you can see it has been bent grass, where he is nearly a half a stroke better. So $7,500, I think he has some upside both for DFS and potentially as an outright. And now we're going way to the bottom of the board. The only player I probably won't bet for an outright that we're talking up in this video, which is Lee Hodges at $6,500. I'm looking at him for a potential top 10, and a lot of it comes down to his form. I mean, that's the most obvious part with Lee Hodges, is he's playing some of the best golf he has for quite some time. Just to show you how the finishes have gone for Lee, we go down here to 6,500. You'll see that it's T12, T12, T24, T58. So just kind of killing you with the consistency, but also the shots gained metrics. You take a look at the last 12 measured rounds, you'll see that they're rather impressive. You can see he's losing off the tee, but every other category is into the green. Pretty solid with the putter with over 0.6 strokes per round. And most impressive of all is he gaining over a stroke per round with the approach play, which is next level stuff. There's really no one in the field that can replicate that. Just going out there and is extremely dialed in regardless of the proximity bucket. And though he's losing off the tee, which on paper doesn't look great, if you take a look at his driving accuracy numbers, he's actually one of the better players in the field when it comes to his driving accuracy. So hitting fairways, a solid long iron player. The putting stats are never the best for Lee Hodges, but you gotta remember he's 6,500, right? You're getting what you're paying for at some stage. But with the upside with the ball striking, the ability to hit some fairways, at 6,500, I can see him going out there making the cut. There is a cut this week, by the way. It's top 50 in ties, also anyone within 10 of the lead. Somebody like Lee Hodges, if he goes out there and he finishes top 20, that's going to be pretty close to an optimal play, but a top 10 finish would lock it up, right? Would for sure be somebody that you could have for the large field GPP and potentially take it down. I think he has upside for that. So I'm going to try and take him for a top 10 placement. We'll see if the odds on Hard Rock are fair compared to the other books. And then for the DFS perspective, he's not going to be chalky, right? He'll get some steam because of the form coming in, but I can't seeing him over like 10% ownership. So if we're getting him like 5 to 7%, I'll be a buyer there. I'll take him at 15, 20%. If he's 10% or above, maybe we reconsider. But considering the fact that 6,500, right? No one in this range is really going to be that chalky. I just can't see that happening. So, of course, right, make sure to check out the Patreon for my ownership projections, which will be dropping on Tuesday afternoon. And, of course, for our Wednesday live stream, where I'll have those ownership projections, we'll be able to go over any of your questions. So if you want to know if somebody's chalky, for example, go ahead, just ask me down in the chat. And, of course, if there's anyone in particular that you want to know if I'm playing or not, right, it's a good time to go out there and ask those kind of questions. So make sure to tune back in for that on Wednesday. That'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for this week's DFS and betting preview. Before you hopping out of here, go ahead and smash that like button for me, and also comment down below who you've got winning this golf tournament. I'm going to go ahead and take Scotty, but once somebody's taken, they cannot be taken again. So take anyone but Scotty to go out there and win this golf tournament. And if they do, you will win a free month of my Patreon page. So love doing these giveaways, a little bit of fun going out there and seeing your takes as well. So go ahead, make sure to comment that down below, smash that like button if you haven't already, and let's go out there and crush it for our DFS lineups and outrights this week. I'm looking forward to the rest of the content. We'll have some sort of prop preview drop in either Tuesday night, maybe Wednesday morning, so keep an eye out for that. And of course, our Wednesday live stream like I mentioned before. So I'm looking forward to it all. Should be a good week with this signature field out there, and a golf course that could really steal a show. It's one of the more difficult out there, like I mentioned, which for the weekend usually makes for some high entertainment. So I am stoked for it, looking forward to it, like I said, and I'll see you guys for the content throughout the week.